And I have some cards there that grow into wildflowers, although mine grew into crabgrass. But it grew into something, right? It's better than going into the landfill. So you're more than welcome to take a card. If you don't want it, just leave it there and we'll pick it up later. Some of you are looking at the thing with the marijuana leaf. 1 month from now, the question we want to ask, should we legalize, medicalize, or criminalize marijuana? And I hope everybody will show up completely straight. So the other thing I do want to point out, I want to thank the panel for being here. By being here, they are not endorsing me. And I wanted to make sure that that was clear. They're doing this because they consider this to be an important subject. And so I'll quickly introduce them. We'll start with Vijay Nevitt, who is the founder and director of a work-in-progress yoga studio. Hold your hand up. And so she's an entrepreneur. And she does if you ever get to her website, she has some amazing artistic kinds of things there as well. And then next to her is Brenda Gutierrez, who is the program director for Salina Area United Way. We were discussing whether or not she's been on every single committee of every single organization in Salina. I think it's close. And then Courtney Train, who is the youth advocate for DVAC. And so with that, this is kind of an open-ended thing. I'm going to walk around with a microphone, and they will take questions, give comments, whatever it is. So I'm kind of off to the side now. Okay? With that, I turn it over to Brenda, who's sort of acting as the monitor.
Thank you, everyone, for coming this evening. Following our introduction, we would like to have an introduction of who's in the room before we get too deep into too far or not far enough. So if we would start over at the table that the Michaels and the Martins are at, if you would say your name and what your interest is or what brought you to this evening.
And I'm going to get the music turned down.
Well, I'm Gary Martins, and I came to just listen, and I've been involved in several social justice type areas, so it kind of ties in.
Good, welcome.
Larry Michael, I'm an attorney in Salina, and I do a lot of employment law that involves sexual harassment and discrimination. So,
thank you for sharing that.
I'm Laurel Michael, and I'm his daughter, and I also am an attorney with him, so kind of along the same lines as that.
I'm Jennifer Michael. I'm her mother, his wife, and I like to listen to Courtney Train speak.
All right, 4 great reasons that we have
Let's go
so
back
far.
to the corner table over here. Let's start right here.
I'm Blair Wade. I came because my friends invited me. I know Courtney.
Yay, welcome, Blair.
I'm Jonah Vossler, and I'm just here to listen.
Hi everybody, Ryan Kuzer. Sounded like a good topic and good people. I'm also here to listen.
I'm Lauren Bathon, and I'm here to listen. I'm excited about the topic and want to see what different people's opinions are.
Jason Bathon, here to be supportive.
Anita Alton, because I want to become more involved and more active in certain areas, and this is one of them, so I'm happy to find out more information. I still firmly believe that knowledge is power.
Very good.
And in case you didn't know, Jason ran for county commission some years ago, and he's a good volleyball player, it turns out.
I'm Noah, and I found out about this about 20 minutes ago because he said he was going to go, and I thought, fuck it.
I'm Max Walbrock-Talley, and I'm here really to listen and learn from these ladies up here about this issue.
My name is Julie Denny, I'm a sexual assault survivor. I'll tell you my story later, but don't let me know. This is where I'm at.
Okay, welcome.
Joan Rassler.
Hi, Joan.
Gary Schwarzenegger, it's a relevant topic for relevant people.
George Yerkovich, here to listen.
Rachel Beaker, the topic interests me. I'm developing, where my part is in the community and what I can do to help. So,
James Bowden, this topic affects everyone in one way or another, and so it's important for us to learn about it.
I'm Stephen Cook, I'm a videographer, and just coming to listen.
Welcome. Thank you everyone for coming. We're going to start the panel by sharing a little bit about what we do, our background on why we said yes, why we're here, and we want this to be interactive. As we're sharing, if you have questions, we'd like you to share those questions, and also we want to include sharing the story. We do have some notes and prompts based on what we do. A couple of housekeeping things. If you need the restrooms behind us or outside, there's some around the hall, just in case if you need those things. And the water and tea and the beverage, the food will be coming around. We want to make sure you feel comfortable and at ease as we have this conversation this evening. So as we get started, when you think about too far or not far enough, as a program director at the Salina Area United Way, we fight for the health, education, and the financial stability of all people. That's our credo. That's a credo for United Way worldwide. So not only in this community and in our 10-county service area, whenever you are around any United Way, all around the world, thinking about we fight for the health, education, and the financial stability of all people. The mission statement for the Salina Area United Way is to strengthen our community. One thing that I do believe that all of you coming tonight to listen and to share will help strengthen our community. Now, if each one of you would introduce yourself. Courtney?
Thank you all so much for coming here. It's really cool to see people wanting to support this topic and learn more. Listen is amazing. So I work as a victim advocate at DVAC, the Domestic Violence Association of Central Kansas. And so I serve victims of sexual assault and domestic violence, as well as human trafficking, elder abuse, and stalking. And so I said yes to this because part of my mission at DVAC and as a human being is to spread awareness about these types of topics and to prevent abuse and harassment and assault. So I'm really happy to be here and share some statistics and information and survivors' experiences and hopefully give you some insight into this movement.
I think first and foremost I'm here because I love hearing her talk too. It's true. I can't get enough of hearing her talk about things. Plus, I thought it was cool that I get to get involved and not just hear her talk, but maybe converse with her about some things. For myself personally, I guess I have my own story. I've heard enough stories that I understand the relevance of the Me Too movement. Oh, closer. I can't. I told you to talk like this on a microphone like every day. I don't know why I'm not. Anyway, I understand the relevance, and I guess I have an opinion, but I also wanted to hear what other people think, and more than anything, like the other side, like men, like what are their experiences, or what are the, I don't know, your thoughts and opinions on how it leaves you feeling as like women start to speak up more and more. And I know it's not just a one-sided thing, but I also just know in my experiences the like backlash from people, particularly men, when I was talking about a man publicly. And so I just think it's an interesting topic. I like to hear what other people have to say, and I've no like judgment for anyone's, I guess, behavior on the whole matter, because we all are raised however we're raised, and we've learned whatever we've learned, and we've had the experiences that we've had that have led us to behave the way we behave. So I'm very understanding and compassionate on both sides, the victims, the people who, I don't know what it's called there, the other side. Perpetrator is a terrible word. Also, that's not the word I want to say. But either way, yeah, I guess I feel a deep understanding for everyone in this, and I'm down to talk about it.
Thank you. So thinking about who we are in Salina, we all live in our neighborhoods. I actually live in the country. How many people are rural Salina? Any other besides your forest? So thinking about your community, your neighborhood, then also thinking about your work, your employment, maybe your civic groups, if you belong to any kind of a church or other affiliation. When you think about the too far, not far enough, just kind of laying the groundwork here are the demographics. Think about white, black, or African American, 2 or more races, Asian, other race, Native American, Native Hawaiian, or Pacific Islander. who are we? And that's more at the state level. And then thinking about who are we in Kansas. And I like to flip that to who we are as our values. What do we stand for? So when you think about too far and not far enough, thinking about why we're here and who's hosting this, locally, so we have our county and our city commissions, and then we have our state, our elected officials. What are our expectations locally at the state level and the national level? These are some things to be thinking about. What do we hope to have, who we are, what are our values in Salina and Saline County, the state of Kansas, the United States? There's been some things in the news. What was it, 2006 that this came about, the Me Too? I was trying to do some research ahead of time. So it's been a while, and then 2 years ago there was kind of a resurgence. There's been things across the ocean that have been in the news. Think about some folks, when you think of kings and queens. Is it okay? Is it not okay? It's a pretty serious issue. It's kind of a heavy issue. So Courtney, would you share, you said you had some personal experiences, some things about, through your work you've probably learned.
Sure. So I just want to start off with answering the question, Me Too, too far or not far enough, and I'm sure you all know my answer, which is not far enough. Just a little information about the Me Too movement. It began by a woman speaking out about her experiences and wanting to let more women come forward and share theirs too, and to say, you know, me too, I've experienced harassment, assault, rape, violence. And so at first it was a women's issue. And I think over the years, over the last decade, it's transformed into something much larger to include people of all demographics, including men. So I think there's so much more room to grow within the Me Too movement of people speaking out. And I think men especially need to come forward, or not need to come forward, but we would love for men to share their experiences like Visay said. Because I think a lot of times we think abuse is a women's issue, women are the victims, and of course women make up most of the statistics. So 1 in 2 women experience sexual assault, 1 in 5 men or 7 men experience sexual assault, 1 in 5 women experience rape, 1 in 71 men experience rape. So that's still a large number. And then there's some demographics or some statistics with youth, which several surveys say different things. This maybe isn't an exact one, but a common one that we hear is 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys experience some form of sexual violence before they turn 18. So we're talking about maybe they've been exposed, forced to see pornography, maybe someone has inappropriately touched them or made some sexual comments to them, so it can be pretty broad. But youth, young people, girls and boys are exposed to this type of sexual violence. So it's naive to think that this is only happening to women, and it's harder for men to come out if we just make it a women's issue. So I'm acknowledging right now there are men in this room who've probably experienced some form of sexual violence, and there are women in this room as well. So those are just some of the statistics, and other areas where I feel like the Me Too movement could grow is making it not just about, it seems like it's been really political in the workplace and what's happening in the political arena, but also just like daily living within our families, within our homes, within on the streets. And I think people don't always know what sexual harassment is. Sexual harassment can be anywhere from catcalling someone to, you know, talking about someone's sexuality, talking about like sexual jokes or comments. And so we're guilty of the stuff we don't even know. You know, I've made a lot of stupid choices, and I mean, I'm just thinking in high school, I was in theater, and theater kids are touchy-feely. Drew would know. And so, like, we used to just go up and start rubbing each other's backs, and now I'm like, oh, that's, you know, that can be considered sexual harassment. You're not getting someone's consent and just, like, going up and touching someone. And so there needs to be a lot of education on what consent is, which is you're enthusiastically saying, you know, yes, I want to do this. And it doesn't matter what relationships you've had before with the person, just every single time, any type of physical or sexual contact, making sure both people are mutually interested and involved. So sexual harassment is one-sided. It's defined by the person being harassed. So you don't get to decide, oh, did I sexually harass you? No, the person decides, okay, do I feel uncomfortable? Do I feel like this person's crossed a line? So that's also an interesting part. There's a lot of gray area where it's a person who gets to decide if I was sexually harassed or not. And it's all about just comfort level. So there's just a little bit of information, and I'll keep on trying to share more information as it comes to my mind about these topics. So Vizay, I'm wondering, do you think the Me Too movement has gone too far or not far enough?
No, not far enough, but here's why. I guess because it's not over, we already know it's not over, so I guess that's where I'm at with it. It's still going, so it hasn't gone far enough. I'm a believer in, like, everything happens the way it's meant to, so therefore, like, we were all kind of meant to come out at this time and have this conversation in this way during this kind of chaotic moment in our lives in our country, and it's not going to go away until everyone is more sensitive about the subject that we already need to talk about and don't talk about it enough. I definitely don't think we've gone too far because it's not something everyone's aware of yet, because it's just still constantly happening every day. I've kind of like forgot about being a waitress. Like, I honestly put that out of my mind, and now I'm all, oh man, there's a rush of experiences that happened, like more so worse when I worked at a pool hall, but still, and you know, I remember something happening one time and someone saying to me, like, well, you know, you're wearing like a skirt and knee socks, and I was like, yeah, that doesn't give him the right. Like, I was like kind of crying, and it was after a really terrible experience, and someone was trying to like make me feel wrong, and like at the time, I was a very just self-conscious person, and I could have been easily swayed. However, my emotional reaction from the experience was so raw and honest that I like couldn't be swayed. That was all like, I'm freaking out, like clearly this is not okay and this is a big deal. And the person was trying to make it not a big deal. And I was like, no. And anyway, I guess I've like, you know, many stories that I could share, but I guess the point is, I love that we even are to this like point in our civilized ways that we have the privilege of going here. We're at this point, like we're here because we've like come from where we've been. Like this is evolution, if you ask me, having this conversation and becoming sensitive about this issue rather than just kind of shoving it under the rug. I love how Courtney mentioned how we do it, or it's just happened so many times that like we don't have people's consent and we'll say or do something because it's unconscious, because it's not something we've ever learned not to do or how it affects other people. And like I remember multiple times I've just posted on my social media about catcalling, because I get real upset about it. It's just like a silly pet peeve, but I get so mad because I just feel like it's so disrespectful and like the worst way to get someone's attention. And so I've had a few serious rants about that and other things on my social media. Phil actually said that's why he invited me. I've spoken out about this kind of thing, just personal experience a few times, and honestly it was like for all the times I didn't and for all the people who don't, it was just like I'm feeling bold and empowered and strong enough to talk about it. So you know, I posted my own Me Too things as they came up for me, and as I was brave enough to share. So yeah, definitely think this conversation could go on for decades until like it's ingrained as part of the education of children, how you treat other people.
I wonder if we could, real quickly, since we have an attorney who deals with this stuff, if you wanted to offer a comment or two about, from a legal perspective, dealing with employers and employees. Any thoughts you'd like to share? Free legal advice? No, I'm just kidding.
It's such a broad topic, I'm not even sure where to go with it because there's so many facets to the issue.
How do you define sexual harassment?
Well, I think Yeah, there's, anything that interferes with the ability to work. So the definition of sexual harassment in the workplace would be if it's interfering with your ability to perform your job or work. That would be the legal definition.
Based on gender?
Gender or gender stereotypes.
So bullying isn't necessarily sexual harassment.
Well, sexual harassment has got to be based on your gender. So there is a lot of overlap between what we would call bullying and what might be considered sexual harassment. So, yeah, bullying is a form of sexual harassment if it's based on your gender.
Okay, thank you for sharing. We have legal expertise in the room. I'm trying to see if I brought a definition with me. Sexual harassment is unwanted and unwelcome sexual behavior that makes you feel uncomfortable and interferes with your ability to get an education, perform your work duties, go to social outings. It can result from words, actions, or behaviors of a sexual nature that feel uncomfortable, are offensive, or frighten or threaten you. Sexual harassment is defined by the person being harassed. It can happen once or many times. So that's broad and includes outside of the workplace as well, so not necessarily the legal definition. So I wanted to touch on, she brought up some personal experiences from when she was younger, and so one issue that I see is young girls especially, but probably even young boys, is we don't have the confidence to not only know that, maybe it'd be the knowledge to know that, hey, this behavior that someone's putting out to me is not appropriate, and then we don't have the confidence to say to someone, hey, I'm not comfortable with how you're talking to me or how you're treating me or touching me or anything like that. And I'm sure, if someone is doing this to a young man or even an adult, it's really hard to say, like, you're crossing my boundary right now and this is not okay. Just a few years ago, I feel like I experienced sexual harassment. I was volunteering at an organization, and the, what's it called, the CEO, the executive director, I was leaving the bathroom, and it was like a volunteer awards night, and so I was wearing this cute little outfit, and so I'm walking out of the bathroom, and there's just a hallway, and the executive director, who's like a 60-something-year-old man, he was standing there, and so I have to go past him. I can't just go the other way. And he's just staring at me the whole time, and I'm like, okay, stop staring. I'm like, all right, I'm awkward. I'm socially awkward in general. You're not making this any better for me. Let's pretend like we don't see each other, and then as we pass, then we'll be like, hey, great time, yeah. So I approach him, and he grabs my hands, and he tells me, you look so beautiful tonight. And then he says, I never noticed how long your legs look. And because I'm awkward, I just made this little snarky comment of oh, well, that's because I'm wearing heels and a short dress, so it makes my legs look long. And I'm thinking, oh my God, get me the heck out of here. And in after the hallway is the room where my husband is and his wife is. And I'm like, this does not feel appropriate. And because I'm his volunteer, he has power over me, so that's a big piece. You need to acknowledge, what power do I have in my life? Because we all have power over people, whether it's age, gender, race, income, your job, how long you've been somewhere, anything. If you have more power in one area, you do not get to make comments like that to someone. In general, you don't get to make comments, but you have to be even more conscious of, okay, what am I saying this? How am I wording this? And would this person feel comfortable saying, that's icky, please don't say that to me? Because usually with someone with less power can't say that type of stuff. They don't feel confident enough. And so he just made some other comments of I'm so lucky to have you as a volunteer, and you're so gorgeous. And I'm like, oh my God. So we're also taught as young girls especially, but probably guys too, I don't know, I want to hear from the guys soon, that we are to take things as compliments. We are to be flattered, and we are to want to seek this attention. And so I'm getting these mixed messages even as a young adult of okay, should I feel flattered? He's giving me attention. I should feel like this is a good thing. But inside of me, I'm feeling like this is gross. I don't know how to get out of this situation. And so these are the issues that I think young people are facing, is how do we give them the confidence to know that that's not okay for someone to make those comments to them, and then they have a right to say, hey, please don't talk to me like that. And I'm still working on it. I'm like, okay, I haven't gone back to this organization. So in the definition I said, it's when you feel like you've been sexually harassed, you avoid social situations or social outings. And so this is an organization that I love, and I have not volunteered with them since, and this has been probably 2 or 3 years now. So it's changed the way I interact, and now every time I see this person, I kind of avoid them, and they're probably like, why is she like avoiding me? And they've come up and talked to me and like grab my hand again. I'm like, oh God. And like, I feel safe, but I'm also just like, I'm at a point in my life where I want to stand up for myself. But at the same time, I'm like, oh God, I can't do that. So Visée has inspired me by like speaking out for someone who had recently made comments to her in the past. Like she had published that on social media, and I'm like, wow, like you get to do that? You're gonna call these people out? And so I'm inspired, thank you, Visée. So one day, I'm gonna go back and volunteer for that organization, and I'm gonna stick it to them. I'm probably just acting like I'm incredibly strong, and every time I see them, I'm gonna turn the other way. So I wanna share even my experience that even as a victim advocate, someone who, acts like they know what they're talking about and acts confident, like it's even hard for me to say to someone like, you don't get the right to say those comments to me, and I wanna just apologize and be like, oh no, I'm sorry I dressed like this, or please, I'm uncomfortable. I'm like, no, I don't need to apologize for anything. Like, so I share that because I want you to understand how simple these things are, and how much they affect a person, even if you don't think so, and like to be conscious of the comments that you're making to people.
So if I could just jump in real quick. A few years ago in Kansas City, I was with a group of people, and there was a woman there who was attracted to me, and I wasn't attracted to her. And she laid her hand on my arm. She talked about how she'd like to come visit me, and she would like to do these things. And what I found myself wondering is, how can I turn this person away, not make her mad, not change the dynamic of the group, keep the positive flow of that group going? And I couldn't figure out how to do it, actually. And then I started thinking, when I was at the hardware store, I talked to 2 young women there, and I said, do you have a lot of like good old boys coming into the hardware store all the time? They just rolled their eyes. They said it's constant. So their whole job is about, how do I avoid that kind of crap? Who would like to share a similar experience? And I know we have some women here who have been doing this for a long time, working for a long time. I want to point to Ann Knowles, because she was the last one in. We could have had her sing the national anthem.
I could have.
Yeah, but Ann was the director of tourism for the state of Arizona at a time when she was kind of alone there, not only with the legislature, but with the staff. And I wondered, how did you deal with that? You have to hold the mic.
Sexual politics has been around for a long time. And in the political arena, it still, as you all know, if you watch television at all, it goes on all the time. So, as a state director, a female state director wanting to get legislation passed, I went to bars, I sat next to legislators at the bar, I smiled at them, I patted them on the shoulder, they patted me on the arm, always just on the verge of letting them know that maybe I was interested in order to get the legislation passed. Now that's back in the dark ages. We don't have to do that so much anymore. But I can tell you it still goes on. And the way that you can confront that with someone in my age group and my age at 40 when I was doing that, is to try to treat them as friends and let them know that because we are friends, we simply cannot have any other kind of relationship. But it was a game of cat and mouse always, with a woman in a position of authority with no other women in authority around her. It was a game of cat and mouse. And you can talk to female legislators today, and they will tell you the same thing. It's far from being over. Now, I suppose it works the other way too, as Phil just said, that women can sort of do a come on to a male
in order to get them to do what you want them to do, and women have been doing that for a long time. And for thousands of years, that was the only way to do it. So we're in a period of transition, and I think it's important for women to be sure of who they are, to be straight with those with whom they communicate, and also to be careful not to assume that that man is making a pass at me. I think we've gone a little too far that way as well. If you look at some of the complaints that have been put in the newspaper from our congressional in the Washington D.C. area, I think probably there could be some getting even maybe. I don't know. I'm not in a position to judge that. I don't know what is in their mind. But I think we have to be very clear, as objective as we can, and to be careful as to what we do that might send misinformation as well.
Anyone else?
I would like to echo one of the things that Ann shared. When you think about what's a reflection in the state of Kansas, thinking about the elected officials, diversity of the elected officials, the male, the female, and then how about their support staff? Again, that power over someone, what's the expectation of when you think about support staff? But keeping those things in mind.
Or teachers with their students, that's another. When I was dean at Brown Mackie, I always made sure I had the door open, and I'd bring in the female business manager, so I always had, she was also HR, so I always had somebody there, a third person, no matter what, because it's just too much of a powder keg. Who else wants to say something? We have some young women here who are also high up, but
I just had a couple things. One of the things I'd like to see is I don't want the Me Too movement co-opted by men. I want them to have their own movements if they need that group. The Me Too movement for me is a women's group. I don't want white people to co-opt Black Lives Matter. If they want to move on their own, they should get their own movement. And I'm not trying to discount what happens to men. What I'm saying is that the Me Too movement is for women.
Anybody like to respond to that?
Gary, you look like you're just dying to say something.
Always.
No?
Which Gary?
Gary Martins.
Well, Gary always does that.
Well, I don't know. I guess I understand what you're saying. That yes, it's a movement started by women, and it's important to recognize that as that. But it crosses and goes all directions, and I think the thing is what Courtney said is it's not up to the harasser or the person making the statement or doing the action as to whether they did the harassing. It's up to the person that was the receiver of that to decide. And that can go both ways. I think the importance, though, I tie with the base of what you're saying, though, because it's historically, though, the women have been oppressed. Women, not the women. Women have been oppressed, and treated so poorly about these things that yes, I think it is a women's movement. But I think the key thing is for whatever direction it's going, because gay men, it happens to, and it occurs, of course, women to women, men to men, straight men to gay men because they're making fun of their sexuality, all sorts of directions. But I think, I don't know what I think. Where I'm going to, how I'm going to wrap that up is what I'm saying. But the key is, I think that it is. I agree. It's the women's movement, and it belongs to them, and it's not up to men to decide. But I think the overall sexual harassment and sexual abuse issue, it crosses the lines to all genders and goes every direction.
Hang on, we got something.
So when I was originally kind of drawn to this, I had and this kind of goes with who this movement's really representing. I've just gone to Janice campaign, which is for domestic violence on campus, and one of the breakout sessions was representation of African American women, and it was just kind of interesting timing. her interpretation of the Me Too movement is that, you know, it was originally founded in 2008, you know, by a minority woman, and it didn't gain any speed until, you know, the white women started posting and saying, this is me. And so really the movement was started to help these minority women who already have, African American women are at the bottom of the totem pole in the stratification of our society. I mean, they truly are. Whether we want to admit it or not, they're black, they're women, they're at the bottom, they don't have the power to speak up. I feel the movement's gotten away from helping who it truly can help. I think it's a good movement, but I think it's turned into a witch hunt, to where we're calling people out, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but what action has become of it? Because this is still an issue. So I don't know. I don't know really how to wrap that up, but I mean, are we really addressing the needs of everybody that needs to be addressed, or are we just still just scratching the surface of it?
All right, we have somebody over here.
I've heard a lot of good things so far. A couple of things that kind of jumped out at me that I wanted to kind of echo and tie together a little bit as far as what I was thinking. I think one of the biggest things that I kind of struggle with is being a male and being, not necessarily being what I think of as like a victim or anything like that. It's tough sometimes to feel like I'm maybe entitled to have an opinion on some of this stuff. I know I should, and I do. It does make it a little challenging to kind of speak up when I don't feel like I'm at times maybe as much of a direct stakeholder as an abuse victim or something like that. So whether or not I speak again, I wanted to make sure to grab the mic and get out of my comfort zone a little bit. And that's one thing that kind of, just to kind of echo Jason, is I guess it's a little bit adjacent to that, but I don't know, I guess at times, my role in this movement as an advocate, or do I step aside or do I support? I think there's a lot of nuance, and to kind of echo what Ann said, there's a lot of gray area, I think, and I think jerking the wheel and giving fuel to the fire of backlash narratives and everything like that is so predominant in today's culture that's a really tough kind of balancing act at times. And so I'm just happy to kind of be here and continue to kind of feel out what my role is in this. So whether I speak again or not, I wanted to make sure I did. So thanks.
Thank you.
I think it's important too. You mentioned wearing high heels, and did you say a short skirt? And I don't know. There's this idea that somehow women are inviting this, but for me anyway, I still have the power to make a choice. I can still decide I'm not going to act on whatever I'm seeing. So, Doug, what do you see as, I kind of took over, I'm sorry. What do you see as marketing? What role does marketing play in putting us in this position? And I'll say this because when I was a young man, my parents were in their 40s when they had me, so they were like grandparents. I knew nothing. And I couldn't talk to women about anything because, well, they're the ones I don't know anything about. So, of course, I talked to my friends, and they'd hand me a book on 101 best opening lines, and that kind of stuff. And it was the assumption that women were just waiting for the perfect line. That's what I grew up in, and it took me years later to figure out, maybe, but not all the time. So, do any of you have any thoughts about the role of our society and how it markets sexuality as being part of that, or anything else?
Thinking about influencers.
Yeah.
How did you find out about social media? So if it's a hashtag #MeToo, and if women are using that on Facebook or Twitter, and if men are using it, these are just examples, if men are using it, they're using it in support of the movement, in support of women in that cause. Think about colleges, junior colleges, trade schools, pop culture, Think about music, mothers of boys and men, mothers of girls and young women. How are we growing our youth to know these things? Think about blended families. Bill gave the examples of, he felt like if his parents are grandparents in that age of raising, think about the grandparents who really are raising kids, blended families in our community. How do we help grow our community to be the best that it can be? How do we have these kind of hard or deep or dark conversations?
I just wanted to say on what Phil was talking about and what you're talking about. I grew up all over the place as a military brat, but my grandparents and my parents are Southern. And there's a whole culture of, as a female, you just sort of say, okay, thank you, like Courtney was saying, what do you do when an older Southern gentleman is just being nice to you? You know, just complimenting you on what you're wearing or how you look or whatever, and that's a cultural thing that we need to help shift. And how do you do that when do you wait for the older folks to die out and bring in this new generation of thought process? Well, I mean, what do you do though? How do you help the older generation understand that what they're saying is not okay, but you don't want to be perceived as disrespectful? And perception is reality. If I perceive what you have said as an advance or inappropriate, then it was. And if you perceive on the other end that what you said was just a casual, oh, I like your hair, then it was to you as well. So there's it's a hard balance.
Well,
Phil?
we got just a second.
To kind of go off what you're saying and talking about like the younger generations too, I'm a high school teacher, and I teach debate and forensics. So we're always talking about social issues and different things. And one thing I notice is many of the kids are very on the forefront of these things and will speak up. But at the same time, we also have situations where they are following in what I would probably say are their parents' footsteps and their parents' ideas. Just to think of like two situations very recently that happened. We had a boy in an English class, they were talking about instances of rape and saying that men get raped too and that they don't report it. And he said, well, that's because they're not a bunch of little like women are. You know, and that teacher was just beside herself, like didn't even know how to react. But then in my class, I had a student, a young man, tell a girl to suck mine, and she flat out, or she hit him, and then started crying. And you know, I went over and had a discussion with him about that, and I think I scared him to the point that, well, he didn't move for 10 minutes. So.
No, I was just going to say that the balance is so difficult now, and of course, I'm not young anymore, but just 2 years ago, I worked with public school systems. Phil and I both work for a company where we go out and assess organizational charts and job descriptions. I'm a touchy person. I like to touch people. I don't mean anything by it. I also like to compliment people on how they look. So I was walking down the hallway with a person at that point who was the project manager we were at Napa Community College, and this man came walking by. He had on a gray sport coat and a shirt that was just perfect with his complexion. I said, you just look great today. The project manager with whom I was working said, Ann, you can't say things like that. You can't tell somebody something like that. He'll take offense. He'll think you're being assertive, that you're trying to make a pass at him. And I thought, you know, it's too bad that it's gotten so far off that we can't give a genuine compliment to each other without it being misinterpreted. And I really think we women are smart enough to know when it's a pass. I really think we know. And I want to compliment people. I want to tell them they look great. And I'm very, very hesitant now, just because of that one comment 2 years ago, as to how much I can do. I'm likely to come up with to someone I just met and pat them on the shoulder. And I'm sort of like Joe Biden. I have to stop touching people, I guess. But I think that we have to find that balance. That doesn't mean that women are not constantly taken advantage of, because they are. But I do think men sometimes are taken advantage of too. And we women who are in that position to make it work have to be really thoughtful on how we interact with people we don't know very well.
I'm going to pass this over. I'm wondering if Laurel has ever experienced people not taking you seriously because you're a young woman.
I just wanted to, and continue what Ann was saying, there's a clear difference between that color looks nice on you and, you know, your butt looks great in those pants, or whatever the comment is that's being said. But there are times where just because you know it's not a pass doesn't mean it didn't make you uncomfortable. You know, I know 20 years ago when I was an intern, I had a boss that was my grandfather's good friend, and I got the internship because of it, and I was all excited. It's my first professional job. I'm young 20s. Went out, bought a suit, looked cute. I was excited about it. Went to my first day, and he calls me, Southern gentleman, calls me to his office and says, "Your outfit is a little femme fatale for where we are, and maybe you'll want to tone it down." I had a sport coat, pants, and a cute top. I thought I looked professional. It was an outfit from Express, like it was on the model, you know. And I went home and I was really upset and confused. And what do I say? This is my boss. This is my granddad's friend. He's just Southern. He's just nice. I know that he's not trying to get anywhere with me, but it made me uncomfortable. And it really aggravated my parents when I said, I need a new wardrobe. I can't go to this job because, you know, he said something to me about it, and on the same hand the next day. So I did. I went out and bought new dresses and things with my mom. Does this look okay? And next day he says, well, I didn't mean he had to wear a burlap sack. So, you know, again, just because somebody's saying something or complimenting or not complimenting you doesn't mean, if they're not making a pass at you, it doesn't mean it's not, it's okay. I guess is where I was going.
Well, anybody? Yep, John, and I see two people there. So we'll just let them go one after the other, okay? Is that all right?
Yeah, what you said a bit ago about marketing, and what Lauren is saying about you know, her boss's over concern with what she was wearing. The two different sides of what I see is, well, heck, I took a statistics class ages ago and some journalism, and that's one thing you know, it's the first thing you know is sex sells. And it is so pervasive, I don't think we even see it so much, because it's everywhere. You're just expected to look a certain way, and then times change and you're expected to look a different way. And I think some of what we're marketed maybe stretches us to wear things that we wouldn't otherwise, or to look a way that maybe is not what we really are, not really who we are. So we're overly concerned with what we look like as a culture, and other people are overly concerned with what we look like. And really, it doesn't make a difference. It's what we are doing and how we treat people, and you know, that matters.
Hold the mic. You have a quiet voice, so you have to hold the mic real close.
It's not what my husband says.
I wouldn't.
I have several issues about this, and I'm going to start with today. Today in USD 305, and I have a teacher here,
my 11-year-old granddaughter had to call home for a new shirt because she was wearing half sleeves and too much of her arm was showing, that it would distract the male students from their studies. That's the wrong attitude. Something's wrong if a girl's arm is distracting a young man, 11 years old. So we need to start with our schools on this and make some changes there. You know, when we talk about rape, it's not what a girl's wearing, and we all know that, or what a guy is wearing. I was 14. He was a cop. I tell you exactly what I was wearing. I'm 61 years old today, or I'll be 61 next month. And I can tell you everything I was wearing that night. A pair of blue jeans, a long sleeve shirt, it was a little chilly, I had a yellow windbreaker over it. The point is, he had no right to do what he did, and even less so being a police officer of Salina. And lucky for me, I had a witness who later became a sergeant at the Sheriff's Department. However, fast forwarding today, and seeing our girls still being made ashamed to show their arms or any part of their body like that, something is seriously wrong within our schools where we need to start, because the past is the past. We're not going to be able to rewind and discuss this with people who think it's what a girl's wearing. We need to get into the schools and start letting them know. We do not shame our young women, because in part of shaming them, we're making them more available to be victimized. And that's all I got to say.
Yes, George.
I think maybe what I'm hearing is we need two things in the schools. We need a resurgence of civics training. We need a resurgence of civics training so that people know how politics work. But the other issue, is there such a thing as social skills training in school? I mean, it would seem like a really salient thing to have. Just like a civics class or something like that, because there doesn't seem like there's a consistent, the kids aren't given consistent information. And it depends on how they grow up, who they talk to. And one of the things that why I think this is especially relevant is because I'm not a conservative, but I think that the availability, especially for kids, of watching pornography is so easy today. I mean, when I was growing up, there was the Rainey's drugstore that had Playboys behind the deal, or you would see a Playboy if somebody's uncle had one, and all the guys would come over, if somebody got a hold of their uncle's Playboy, that kind of thing. Now it's two strokes on a keyboard, and the problem with that from society is I think it gives both girls and boys wrong information and wrong impressions, and is definitely not. It's not that it's not educational. It's actually counterproductive. So I don't know. Is there anything in? Is there? I guess my question is there anything like social skills training in school? I mean, in the past, it used to supposed to come from your parents, your church, or whatever. But it sounds like that's not happening.
I haven't been on the school board for a long time, and Larry and I have both been on there. I would say
that teachers are trying to reinforce it as they go. I don't know, it may not be a specific program, but I think they are thinking about it and talking to students as they go. And now we'll talk to a teacher, and then over to you.
I'm not in USD 305, but I know as far as what is mandated by the state, health class, which should include some consent training, but does it? I don't know exactly how that's written in there. There's not a lot of social skills that are mandated, and I think that's where some schools get into problems. I know, like we have a financial class that our school requires, but it's not to teach some of those skills. And then I know we, during our seminar period, like work on some soft skills and social skills in that area, but none of those things are specifically covered.
I remember being in the classroom and thinking, man, I cannot compete with billions of advertising when I tell them, why would you want to go out and buy an Escalade? How are you going to pay for it? You go, don't worry about it, you know?
We do try to teach, I'm a fourth grade teacher, and we try our best to teach social skills. And I do know there is curriculum that the counselors use to teach social skills. The problem is there's not enough time, and there's so many other things that teachers are required to cover. And sometimes, unfortunately, it doesn't get reinforced at home. But I do feel like our school district is trying very hard to address that, and I feel like teachers in general are trying the best they can.
Are you familiar with the consent training you mentioned?
Well, I teach fourth grade, so.
It still doesn't come up?
I mean, we do bullying, but I guess I don't know, like touching, I mean, I don't
I took an interpersonal communication class, graduate level, and they said back then, if you haven't started talking with kids about sexuality, sex, and all of that at age 11, it's too late. So
I mean, we have Happier come, and we have, we have the bullying, and I know, they talk about that in their counseling sessions and stuff. I personally don't. And that's a sticky situation too, because I do know some parents don't want to talk about things like that with 9-year-olds. So that gets a little sticky that way.
Bill, I was going to add that I do go into classrooms as a representative of DVAC. I am not consistent. It's just kind of whichever teacher will invite me in. So usually it is a pregnancy class or the facts class, life skills, things like that. So I'm getting a very small population at Central, Lakewood, South, El Saline. And so with those students, if I can get a one-day presentation, great. Some of the teachers will let me do a whole curriculum, come for like 8 to 10 days to teach in their classroom about these issues: dating, violence, healthy relationships, communication, boundaries, consent, sexual assault, sexual harassment. And from my experience in high school going through health class, I do not remember anything on consent, and if we did touch it, it was, that sounds weird if we covered it. Everything's sounding weird now, okay. If we addressed the issue, then it was very like scientific and legal terms, which obviously that's really important to know what the law is, but it just sounds like, I can't relate to this. And so when I talk with kids about consent, it's about like respect and making sure people feel comfortable and you are listening to yourself and what your boundaries are. So we try to make it more relatable to the students. But anyway, if you have access to a classroom, I'm always happy to share. I don't care what subject you teach. We will make it work, and I will make it seem like I'm in a math class for a reason. So yes, I can provide that training, and I don't think it's happening with every student.
We have, I want to introduce you if you didn't know. Krista Klingenberg over here is longest serving manager here, I think, at Martinelli's. She's the treasurer of my campaign. And Luke Stanford is the campaign manager, and he's a senior at Central High School because, you know what, these guys are involved already. So Luke wanted to say something, so.
I guess I just wanted to touch on the health class stuff, because I'm a senior, so I took it as a freshman, like everyone has to do. And so, so our thing was, they didn't really talk about consent, not that I remember at all. They just mostly went over the scientific definitions. We started doing stuff called I Decide in like middle school, and that didn't talk about consent either. It was mostly like, they had to sing the 13 days of like, or songs of 13 STDs, I guess, like the 13 days of Christmas, but with STDs. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, there's definitely a problem because they don't teach consent, and I know that's a big problem in my school too. Because when I was a freshman, there was like 4 or 5 girls in my grade who were raped that year, and it was just a really big issue. And because they would go to a party or something, and then they'd end up getting drunk and then taken advantage of. And then it was pretty controversial, I remember, because they would end up, half the people would blame the guy, half the people would blame the girl. And it's pretty divisive, but that's just kind of how it is now. They don't teach consent at all. At least from my experience, they didn't teach it. But yeah.
And we have our wait staff, Andrew, wanted to say something.
Well, I'm lucky enough to be with Miss Lindsay at Salina South, and every year she always ends up inviting Courtney or someone, and we kind of have a thing in our rep theater class about consent and something like that. But I know at Salina South, because a couple of my friends are in it, they've created this extracurricular that you can do where it's basically not youth group, I should say, more like a youth support group sort of thing where these things are taught and like talked about and how everyone's doing. And the thing is, you have to be invited to that class by staff. So.
Thank you. Yes, I see a hand over there. James, you've been quiet. I just found out that James took 4th in the city commission race. Officially took 4th.
Thank you, guys. It seems like it could be readily incorporated into the existing sexual education classes that are already happening. When do they start? 4th, 5th grade? It just seems like something that could be integrated in very easily. Sexual education. Did I say special ed?
This is the problem with I was a rock god, now I can't hear it.
Also, I did want to mention something. Hearing the language that's used in identifying things that happen within harassment situations has cued me into a lot of the language that is, that I don't know that we men are recognize. And then, so when I start to hear it, I'm like, oh, that's not okay. Including when it's being said to me, generally speaking, it's not a thing, but I had some things said to me, and I was like, wow, I've heard that in regards to Me Too movement things, and I was like, that's not okay. So it's good to enlighten me.
We've talked about this in the schools, when might be some opportunities to share with, say, 4th grade and up. What about as young adults, when we think about that? Does that fall into the soft skills training, or as young adults, middle age, throughout life? When is an opportunity to share? How do we go about educating now?
His hand went up so fast that it was just, that's $300. No, I'm just kidding.
I believe that when it comes to education, it should be ongoing from kindergarten throughout college and beyond, because it needs to be age appropriate, of course, for kindergarten and 4th grade, but it needs to be continuous and never ending. I also want to make a couple comments. One was that James' point about language and semantics. I don't like how the media portrays rape instead of sexual assault, or sexual assault instead of rape. They don't want to say the word rape, they say sexual assault, or underage girl instead of saying child, or child sex worker instead of saying, young woman. The semantics that the media uses is really abhorrent to me. So I want to make sure that, I don't know how we can change that, but the semantics involved in what we use in the media needs to change. And it's not just that, it's anything from PTSD. George Carlin talks about how we add more words to something and it takes away some of its meaning and makes it more palatable. So instead of saying shell shock, say post-traumatic stress disorder. And he talks about how if you add more words to it, it gets a little less associative to what it actually represented. So, and then one other comment, back to the high school dress codes. I think we need to change that tomorrow. I mean, I don't see why we have to have any difference for women versus boys when it comes to the dress code. we should be teaching men not to have, you know, the urge to stare at a woman instead of teaching women they need to go cover themselves up.
The question on age would be a difficult one. Each child is an individual, and they mature and ask questions at different intervals in their life. As a grandparent, I found it best to answer my grandchildren's questions when they're old enough to ask them. And that's been the rule. If they're old enough to ask me a question, I need to be mature enough to find the answer for them in a way they can understand.
So kind of going back to like the education system, so Title IX and everything in post-secondary. So this is a big issue in post-secondary education, and that's why I work out at Salina Tech. And granted, since we don't have campus life, you're not going to see this as much as you would in dormitories and everything, but it is a growing trend in colleges everywhere of the sexual assault, of going to parties, the issue of consent, what is considered consent, what's not. And they are starting to make growth in the post-secondary fields, which I think is when you're really gonna start seeing it. It will start in high school, but when you're out there and they're starting their lives, they're starting to socialize just on their own, they don't have their homes to go to. I'm losing my train of thought there. But that's where I think more of this consent training needs to come from, and they are, with Title IX and everything, going through with that. Another interesting thing that was kind of brought to where, and if we catch it, the offenders, the perpetrators as you would, when they go through that stage, there's a new issue of restorative justice. That was brought up at the conference, and I went to that breakout session because I'm like, how would restorative justice work with sexual assault? Because that seems like such a personal, that would seem hard to confront the person that did it. And domestic violence, I think, is probably a whole other ballgame and probably couldn't quite work with that. But there was actually really good results because it was easier for the victim, because it wasn't broadcast, because there's a lot of shame that's involved when you're victimized, and that's why it doesn't become broadcasted. But then it also gets the perpetrator to see the harm that's actually done, to have that face-to-face confrontation. And so then that will prevent that from happening in the future. That will establish that empathy. They'll see the harm done instead of just pointing the finger, saying you're wrong, going to a trial, embarrassing both parties, and nobody learns anything. So, I think it's just a giant shift in how we handle it.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I was thinking about, you might have, when it goes more to the legal issues in through court, thinking about rehabilitation, thinking about the wrongdoer. What does that look like? Flipping to the other side, how do we help someone who said these things? How do we help someone who's made those decisions to do actions that are uncomfortable to us? Does it ruin their career? Does it ruin their marriage, their personal life? Do we just leave them in a heap to the side? That's my dad. What do you do? How can we help them? That's my friend, that's my brother, that's my neighbor down the street. So how can we help them move to the positive, make changes to the positive, while also helping the victim? Did anybody have any experience or thoughts on that? Bill's pulling. Okay. Donna, is that?
Yeah, it's me. I'm gonna try to tie that in. How about that? I guess maybe we'll just go with a personal story, kind of tying in both the social aspect. I'm gonna try to bring in something work related. I guess would be the best way to do it. I guess I don't want to use the word offended, but we're really harping on social skills getting taught in school. And I think that that's a little short-sighted. Why, by definition, I would assume social skills means what's normally accepted in society. And if that's what's normally accepted in society, why aren't we all teaching our children or anybody for that matter. And so I'm going to tell you a story. I work at a manufacturing company that employs over 200 employees. And right after I very first started there, I had an engineer who was constantly in my office, constantly making nice comments about how I looked or inviting me out to go and do things, and kind of going back to your comment, Courtney, about being a person in power versus not being a person in power. And technically I was over him. I had more power at that company than he did, but there's something that we haven't talked about at all this whole entire night, which I find very strange. Phil vaguely mentioned it a little bit when he said that a woman had come on to him and he didn't want to hurt her feelings. I don't know about you guys, but as a woman, I've never wanted to not hurt a man's feelings because I was afraid of hurting his feelings. I have always been afraid of hurting a man's feelings and then him retaliating in some way. And that'll usually be, something that's actually going to harm me physically, not necessarily emotionally, okay? So that was my fear as this guy was coming into my office constantly. And as a woman of power, I finally was like, okay, enough is enough, and went and talked to his manager and talked to HR, and I said, we've got to do something here. I'm a little bit afraid, but I highly doubt he's ever going to do something, but you just don't know, right? And so the men in his department sat down with him, not with him, but together, and they developed a plan to teach him these social skills that he was lacking. So it's another piece that we didn't really touch on either, is believing the woman. We haven't really talked about that much at all. You guys have kind of thrown out whether or not women may make accusations, but statistics show that 9 times out of 10, or more than that, the woman is, when she says something, it's not a lie. Okay, so I feel very grateful that the guys in that department took me seriously, and they took me seriously because I had the voice, I had the power to actually stand up and say something. And after I said it, it was like a domino. It was a domino effect, because it wasn't just happening to me. It wasn't just happening to me, it was happening to lots of girls. They had ran a girl out of the engineering department because she felt so uncomfortable, but she didn't speak up because she didn't have that power. So I did have the power, I did say something, but those guys took it upon themselves to not embarrass this guy, but to kind of pull him under their wing and say, hey, this is how you're supposed to act. So instead of relying on our schools or relying on HR to just do a disciplinary action against him, they said, okay, this is what you need to do. And you know what? I haven't heard a peep since or had anything happen since.
Good point. Yes, Joan.
You were very fortunate.
I'm not saying that's my only.
Well,
that's
right.
not my only
But that was
situation, but that's probably one of the
that was a
positive
wonderful
ones.
way for those guys to handle that, and it could have been very different.
Anybody else? Oh, right over here. Here.
Is this on? Okay. I have like way too many thoughts from listening a lot, so this is not going to be pretty. But just because to leave off where she, or to start where she left off, I love the part of like how they took him under the wing, like to talk about it, and I love the part where she was talking about she felt she had the power to say something, and I guess I kind of want to relate that back to how Courtney was saying how like I inspired her one time because I had said something, and I was just thinking like when she said that, I'm like, oh, hang on though, like there's reasons why I felt okay to say something in that moment, because the truth is, and we've had conversations before, and I don't remember like especially what we were talking about. We were talking about when something happens, how you could either like freeze or run. I'm a freezer all the way, like. In every situation, the moment I get uncomfortable, it's like frozen and I can't do anything. But I'm also like the moment where like when I'm unfrozen, I'm all, oh, I have to talk about this, I'm really pissed off, hang on, like, and so unfortunately, in the moments, I have the hardest time standing up for myself, and I don't even know who mentioned the thing about like fear of retaliation, like every fear that could possibly be going through my mind in that moment where I'm froze is like, it's there, and like it's preventing me from speaking, communicating. What was I gonna say? Oh, feel like because of my position right here, right this second in this town, and I'd not been here very long, I didn't know a lot of people. Like I was cool to stir the pot at the time. Now I know a lot of people. I might think twice about that. I probably wouldn't. Because of how it went. But I just want to say, like, it also has to do with that. And someone else mentioned, like, depending on who the person is that, like, is, coming at you. Like, it's hard to make a decision about where you're going to go from there. Like, what you're going to do and how you're going to react afterward. One thing I really loved that Anne had said, I have a bunch of things she said, multiple things. She said, like, we're in a period of transition, and we really are. And I believe, more than anything, the journey to awakening and not having this problem, continue for as many decades as it's probably going to continue for, is education about, more than anything, about communication. I think this is a personal belief. I think it has more to do with our communication skills, and someone had mentioned, the social skills class, because I believe we need to be reprogrammed in the way we react to one another, the way we interact with one another. Switching gears a little bit, but not quite. Like, I'm with Anne, I'm a touchy person, but after like everything that's happened and being a yoga teacher, it's kind of funny. I started my yoga teaching career in California, where everything starts, so I just got to hear everything is very evolved compared to here as far as in that industry. And as I was leaving, like, the consent issue had just come up, and this was like 4 years ago or something. Excuse me. And I, being the touchy person, I'm not weird about it. That's how I am. It's just like, I guess that's the way I interact with people. But anyway, I didn't have consent coins, and I was just touching people at the yoga studio and whatever, and Courtney brought it to my attention, and I was like, I knew about that. So I guess what I'm getting at is, it's more than, like, what is your role? What is everyone's role? It's more than just knowing, it's acting. It's going the extra mile to make those consent coins when she brought it up. And it took me consent coin in yoga, sometimes we'll touch you. Sometimes it's for alignment, to, like, help you fix your posture, your pose, your shape. More often than not, it's like a relaxing touch. It's meant to, like, help you relax into the pose or whatever. Just like the back of your neck or your feet or your shoulders or something simple like that. So the coins are for people to say yes or no. Like, it just basically, if it's open, like there's nothing on the coin, that means they're open to it. If they flip it over, it says no thank you, and there's a hand. So that's what they are. Thank you for telling me. But anyway, I wasn't gonna make them. I mean, I knew about it, and she brought it up, and I was like, that is, to me, that's how you act and take on your role. Because I remember he was saying, like, I don't know what my role is. A lot of people, I don't know what my role is in this whole thing. I think your role is behaving in a way that backs your beliefs, because even if you don't think people are watching, everyone's watching constantly. Like, if you're the guy who happens to go and perhaps say something to a woman who was just, like, verbally harassed, and you just go to just be kind right afterward, that's just the behavior, like making sure that maybe you even say something to the person, the guy who you heard say something, or I don't know, I think it's like a little bit of education is everybody's role. As a yoga teacher who teaches teachers, it's really important to me that I'm not just teaching people how to teach yoga, I'm teaching people how to be teachers. So we literally go through self-study about, like, yourself and what you're putting out there and what you're teaching, and, like, some of it has to do with like some, let's just say, like, past experiences that you've been, like, shoving down, no one to bring up, and, like, so it's behaviors that you've been continuing to do for years and years and years because you didn't look at it. Well, like, these are people who are going to yoga teacher training, so it makes sense that they get to have these conversations because they're trying to change their lives and whatnot. But I love that, we're having the conversation about how to bring this into schools and how, because ever since I started teacher training, actually with Courtney and a couple other women, I was like, how do we have these conversations that we're having for our self-study in teacher training with high school students, with, like, not just women, but like young men too, and literally talk, like one of the subjects is communication, and it goes in so many levels and depths of like what communication would mean. But at the end of the day, I do believe that this whole issue revolves around communication. I want to make sure. Oh, one last thing that I wanted to say that Anne had said, a couple things she said. Women need to be straight, amen, and we all need to be careful not to send misinformation. So part of like when you think someone is maybe like saying something that they say something that makes you feel uncomfortable, like are you, maybe not right in that moment, but do you make it clear in your communication at some point after that moment, like you're not okay with that behavior, or do you let it go and therefore you're just enabling it? You're inviting it because you didn't speak up and say anything in the beginning. So I 100% agree with you, and her line about like we have to be thoughtful. We have to be so much more thoughtful about what we're taking offense from, and what we're not saying when we are offended, I think.
I think we're getting to a point where we're near the end here. I see Anita's hand go up. But as somebody who's thinking about hoping to be in the legislature, it seems to me that in terms of education, what we could do would be to fund programs that address this. Because the problem is you can create a program that everybody has to do, but if you don't provide the money for the teachers, then it's just an unfunded mandate. And in terms of passing laws, we could strengthen laws and employment. It seems to me that anybody has a right to do a fair day's work for fair pay without having to deal with their being called attention or having to deal with sexuality or race or any of those things. It seems to me it should be completely inappropriate.
Well, I found that in Jonna's experience that she made a comment that she was a woman of empowerment because she was over this guy, but they had also made another female engineer lead. And so it also comes to the point where you get to train the business women on how to be assertive. With the lady that got booted out of engineering should have gone and had a way to go to an HR person and have that feeling that this is what I can do, this was wrong. She didn't have that backup and support from the company. Now, when Ann and I were in the local business back when we were 30 and 40, there was no such thing as an AR. And if you went to the big boss and complained about his favorite buddy or vice president or something, yeah, you were the one that got out the door you went. Can't complain about a big boy. But I'm just saying, it's not just teenagers and stuff. It's gotten to the point where these women are from 25 to 35 to 40 that are dealing with this now in the business world that needs to be addressed at their HR, either when they come into the firm or their HR firm be more supportive of the issues of that particular environment. The other thing is I feel like knowledge is power. And I went to an international peace conference in Australia, and their idea of all these superintendents and everybody were there is the idea that if the children of the world are taught education and are educated to a direct curriculum where everybody kind of knows the same thing, this is what will bring peace. And to me, it's the same thing if you start the children so young, you see them at preteens and preschool and everything. This is a good touch, this is a bad touch. It should continue on as an educational thing all through the whole program. Then you won't have these young boys thinking, oh, I can do that, my dad did that, nobody stopped him, I can do that. And so it becomes a thing of teaching the young people, oh, that's not proper. And a lot of I know it sounds funny, I have a 7-year-old first grader great grandson that politely told me that I was doing something I wasn't supposed to at his house, and I went, and it was a word that I used, and I thought it was perfectly fine. It wasn't a swear word. She can't, no, that's not right, you can't say that. I should have said, gosh darn, stuff like that. That's just my comments on what we can do to further the hashtag #MeToo, movement to continue on just from generation to generation.
And she ran coffee routes by herself for many, many years, so she knows all about this. One more, and then we'd like to get closing comments from each of the three of you.
Do you think that when we are teaching our young girls that they're dressing provocatively, that we are taking some of their self-esteem and empowerment away from them?
Yes. Okay, so I will close with a couple of things. I'll respond to that. So I do have some resources about sexual harassment, supporting people who've been sexually assaulted, so feel free, it's on this little table over there. And I have my business card if you want to ask questions. There's no stupid question. I think that's how we learn, is sometimes we don't know, is my behavior appropriate? Is this okay? Like I said, I've done things that I look back and I'm like, that was not appropriate, and I need to make amends. And I have for some things, but not others. So what I want to end with is, yes, when we start at a young age and tell young girls, make them aware of their body and their sexuality, of like, oh, you're sending a sexual message, even if we don't say those things. Like I remember as a little girl, I was like sitting somewhere and my aunt said, close your legs. And I'm like, what? I didn't even understand what that meant, but those little messages, they do get lodged into our consciousness, and we carry them with them for the rest of our life. Okay, that didn't come out. And the same with boys. Like, we have all these mixed messages that, boys and men, you're supposed to make the first move. Girls, we're supposed to be passive. And so, yes, there's a culture shift where we have to just focus more on communication, and we can't make an assumption because of someone's gender that they need to be passive or act like they're hard to get or dress a certain way or they need to make a first move, because that's how sexual assault happens and sexual harassment happens. Because boys, I'm making a heterosexual stereotype here, but boys will think, okay, like, I just gotta go in and kiss her. And then, you're getting kissed, and then the girl is taught, like, okay, I have to like this, even if you're like, whoa, I didn't want that. And so that was a sexual assault right there. There was no communication, there's no, asking, like, are you interested in kissing? And I'll tell you something, don't tell my husband this, because he'll be very embarrassed, but he was the first guy to ask me, can I kiss you? And I was like, at first, as a young girl, it's like, oh my gosh, why would he ask me that? That's so stupid. And now, as a freaking feminist rock star, I'm like, oh my God, no! So I'm so proud of him, and so I hope that you teach your young people, whether girl or guy, that to never make assumptions and to always ask, and it's never an embarrassing thing. It's empowering, and it's a gift to ask someone if they want to be touched or if they want to be held or kissed. And another thing, anytime we have these conversations, I think people get really scared. They start thinking, okay, well, am I going to be accused of sexual harassment? Like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to say to women or to boys or guys. I'm freaking out here. So I want to give you some insights in case you're scared and concerned. Don't worry, I am too. So there's a difference between sexual harassment and flirting. So in order to, make a move, you got to put something out there. And that's okay. It's okay to, ask someone like, hey, do you want to go out sometime? Now, you have to be aware of the power differences. Again, if you're a supervisor, if you have more power over them, it's not okay to make that move. It's not okay to flirt with them, make comments. But, if there's equal power and you're like, I kind of like this person, you can ask them out. If they tell you no, that means I don't get to keep asking them out. That's when it's sexual harassment. When you keep trying to move forward and keep flirting with them and they're like, no, I'm not. So flirting is two ways. It's a compliment. Both people are feeling flattered. Both people are wanting this and feel comfortable. If any one person is feeling like, okay, I gotta go, they're making up excuses, they're jingling the keys, they're like, okay, yeah, it's time to go. That means you gotta stop. All right, so it's okay to, give a comment to someone or to flirt with them. That's fine, but make sure as soon as they're giving you a message that I'm not interested, then you're crossing the line if you keep going. And then in general, if you're wondering like, okay, what comments can I make to someone based on their looks? In general, like compliments, try to choose a compliment that's not about someone's look. That's really hard because we're very surface level people. So try to figure out something you want to say to them. And I'm just thinking as someone, if I wanted to be, I don't know, if I wanted to entertain someone, then I would love it if they gave me a compliment more about who I am as a person rather than, how I look. Anyway, but if you don't want to sexually harass someone, it's not appropriate to talk about body parts that could be related to a sexual nature. So, and this is all subjective, but I know this is the world we're living in. So legs, they can be considered sexual. And again, you gotta look at the whole context, what were they saying? If you're commenting on their butt, you're like, wow, I love those tight jeans on you. And just things that seem kind of like cringy, but it's okay. Like we said earlier, like, I love that color on you. That looks really awesome. those comments are okay. So just know you don't have to like tiptoe. Just be a little more aware of the comments you're making. And I don't know, people walk away thinking, people are going to accuse me of sexual harassment. It's going to be okay. And if you say the wrong thing, we all do that. Come back and say, you know what, I feel like I made a comment to you, and thinking about it, it seemed really awkward. So I'm so sorry. And yeah, please let me know. Please give me feedback. And I have a million more things to say, but I've taken way too much of your time. So if you say, I'm going to pass it to you, see if you have any closing remarks.
Pretty much gave you all my remarks. I'll just answer what your question. I guess I personally believe it's kind of like a little bit of a problem in like our society, like the respect for the human body, like all together, men and women, like naked human body, like we're got a little fear going around about that, and how if it's seen, then it's sexual, and I feel like there's unfortunately a disconnect between like the beauty of a human body and it just being sexual. So to answer your question, no, I don't necessarily believe that, you know, girls need to be like restricted on their, you know, their straps or their, you know, their tank tops or their shorts or things like that. I also, like I always say, I still think it's like a thing of communication. So like if a woman or a young girl wears something that is getting attention that is unwanted, it's about the empowering them to communicate and knowing, like, no, not telling them not to wear it. That's my personal opinion on that.
I want to thank everybody for coming. Think about resources. If you have questions, Courtney had shared some information. Her organization and her card is there. Also, I would share United Way. It's a resource around the United States. Dialing on your telephone, 211. Just touch those 3 numbers. You'll get a live call center specialist. If you have questions or concerns, who do I call? They peel back the layers. What is a concern? And if it's something that needs to go as far as maybe a police report, or you wanting help in definitions of a counselor in our area, BVAC would come up. There are different resources in different communities that you may be. So college students, tech students, I was thinking about, you mentioned the campuses, where and why, what resources are there out there, encouraging students to find out about those resources as well as we can find out about those resources. If a young person comes to you, be ready. I encourage all of us to be able to help young people, to help our community, anywhere you might see someone, and observing and supporting. Just an example this evening, we talked about wait staff, thanking them appropriately.
And let's give our wait staff a hand, by the way.
Thank everyone for coming, and thank Phil for hosting this. And
let's give a hand to our panel.
And Phil, any closing remarks that you wanted to share with us this evening?
I just, you know, in the last 10 years, I've made inappropriate remarks. I've flirted when I shouldn't have flirted. And the question for me was, should I be given a second chance? And as an educator, I know that at the basis, the basic assumption for education is that we can change. They have to want to change too, right? And so I found myself thinking, is it fair for me to ask for a second chance? Or has it just gone on so long that really we've all men have kind of blown their second chances? And so I guess for me personally, the way I feel about this, I'll find out at the election, but if my sacrificing, if my not getting the second chance meant that the women in this room and their daughters and their granddaughters and their great-granddaughters would be treated fairly at work, then it seems to me that would be worth it. So with that, thank you for coming. Next month we're going to talk about marijuana. Anybody who wants to be here, spread the word, and thank you very much. Have a good evening.